Alright, you knuckleheads, we've talked Larry, we've talked Moe, we've talked Curly, we've talked Shemp, and even Joe Besser. But we have yet to spend any amount of time on this channel talking about the stooge that tends to be completely omitted from discussion, Curly Joe. So I thought today, let's set up a review series that will be coming very soon, ranking the Curly Joe era feature films of the Three Stooges. What's your favorite of the Curly Joe era films? In case you're not sure, there are 5 from Columbia, released between 1959 and 1965. Those being Have Rocket Will Travel, Stooges Meet Hercules, Stooges in Orbit, Stooges Go Around the World in a Daze, and one we have talked about on here before, The Outlaws is Coming. There's also an additional feature film that I will include in the ranking and analysis. Their feature film for Fox, Snow White and the Three Stooges. As it was for a different studio, it makes sense that the packaging is much different. It's not included in a lot of the collections and box sets and packs that we've seen in other situations. Of course, these films have been compiled on various collections. Here's one that teams it with several of the Curly era feature films for the Stooges. We're not going to talk about any of those. Time Out for Rhythm, Rockin' in the Rockies, the Shemp film Gold Raiders. I don't want to focus on that. I want to look specifically at the 1960s. I also won't include things like the Kooks Tour TV pilot, things of that nature. Of course, you might remember we got the 5 main Curly Joe feature films on Blu-ray in the Blu-ray set that was released last summer. That was met with much debate and much confusion, and everyone kind of had a different opinion on it. But it does include most of the important Curly Joe era stuff, so that's definitely a plus, including the Three Stooges scrapbook TV pilot. Of course, you could find these feature films elsewhere. I showed you my VHS tapes, and most of them made it to the early kind of themed era Three Stooges DVDs. Here's The Outlaws is Coming. When I ranked the Marx Brothers movies, I kind of started with the film that doesn't really fit as kind of a teaser for the actual ranking. I want to do that again today. The most watched video on my channel is the review of the big Three Stooges 12-pack DVD set, and most of these are Curly and Shemp shorts, but there are 2 exceptions. I just showed you The Outlaws is Coming, and today, as a teaser for the 1960s Stooges ranking, I thought, let's look at the one that I could plausibly include, but really don't have to, and probably shouldn't. You might notice in that collection there was a little release called Stop, Look, and Laugh. Stop, Look, and Laugh is a Three Stooges compilation film. So, clips from previous Stooges shorts that were released as kind of a theatrical feature. In the late 1950s, we saw the works of the great Robert Youngson. He put projects together like The Golden Age of Comedy, which highlighted silent film era comedy, that kind of thing. And we've seen compilation films in many other regards, too. There's things like The World of Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy's Laughing Twenties, stuff like that. And, of course, the compilation films that are probably best remembered today, That's Entertainment, and their sort of tie-in movies like That's Dancing. Compilation films can be a lot of fun. Compilation films can highlight the evolution of something or the historical importance of something. In the case of That's Entertainment, they kind of spotlighted some more rare and uncommon, unusual films. It got, celebrity hosts to talk about them and share their experiences making them or working on them. Stop, Look, and Laugh is a compilation film, again, despite being released after Have Rocket Will Travel, so during the Curly Joe era. Curly is the third Stooge, as it features stock footage from many of the Columbia shorts. I'll show you a little insert here. So no Curly Joe and no new footage of the Stooges. Stop, Look, and Laugh does something kind of interesting in that it tries to weave the clips from these classic shorts from the 30s and 40s into a feature narrative. A narrative that is predominantly driven by ventriloquist Paul Winchell, and his two ventriloquist dummies, Jerry Mahoney and Knucklehead Smith. And you can see him with Jerry Mahoney there on the back of the VHS box. So it's a very loose framing story. Paul Winchell is apparently father to Jerry Mahoney and then some sort of guardian to Knucklehead Smith, and so most of his scenes are him doing gags with these various ventriloquist dummies, most of which aren't especially funny. There are a couple that are mildly amusing. Paul Winchell does really try. I think he has a good screen presence. His dummies, though, are just creepy as all get out. There's even a scene where Jerry Mahoney turns his head around 360 degrees and then proceeds to regurgitate some milk that he just drank on the floor. And all I could think of was, William Peter Blatty must have watched this movie. That kind of thing. And honestly, Jerry Mahoney is just about as scary as Reagan from The Exorcist, so I don't know. And Knucklehead Smith, of course, goes for the goofy, well, I'm not very smart, Mr. Winchell, but here's a clever pun, that kind of thing. I don't know. It's kind of tedious. Officer Joe Bolton, who had hosted a Three Stooges themed television show for kids in the New York area, cameos as Officer Joe in one scene, but he doesn't really get anything to do. And although a lot of the publicity, a lot of the reviews focus on his involvement, he really doesn't do much of anything. I'm not quite sure why they got him, besides just for maybe a cameo for the New York kids to appreciate. But Paul Winchell's pretty good, but his dummies, I could kind of do without them. I know he does the voices for them, as far as I could tell, but he doesn't seem to do most of the actual puppeteering. There are scenes you can see like cabinets and things kind of behind Jerry where the puppeteers would be. So at least there's, I guess, that. He has more ability to do physical comedy. He's not as restrained. But the Stooges clips are worked into this narrative over the course of it there. So, for example, there's a scene where Paul tells Knucklehead about the time he saw at a gas station a big car pull in. Cuts to a clip from Violent is the Word for Curly, the Stooges working on the professor's car, that sort of thing. Some of the clips are more organic, like talking about Mexico, so naturally we get clips from What's the Matador. Others are just kind of shoehorned in there, like Higher Than a Kite. Notably, Paul calls the garage and asks the mechanic, how's the car that belongs to my army friend? This way we can cut to those clips from Higher Than a Kite of the Stooges working on a kind of staff car for a military official, that sort of thing. It's really bizarre, and I don't know, some of it is better than others. Sometimes it's a little too loose, I think, to really work. One complaint that a lot of Three Stooges fans have about Stop, Look, and Laugh is that the shorts themselves are re-edited. Now, this really shouldn't be a surprise because in a compilation film, a lot of times they edit the clips. Even That's Entertainment edits some of the songs and dances and things like that. They have to get kind of creative with the audio and the visuals to make sure it still looks seamless even though there have been pieces cut out. So having, big intact chunks of shorts, probably not going to happen. Of course, some of the more objectionable content would have to be cut too. For example, the anti-Japanese rhetoric is clipped out of Sockabye Baby. That makes sense. I get why they did that edit. But other times they add in music and sound effects. Honestly, it didn't bother me too much. There are some Stooges shorts that use music, like Shot in the Frontier, or their first short, Woman Haters, which is more of a musical in general. So having a Stooges, with background music isn't unheard of. It didn't bother me too much on my last watch through, but I could see if you really like the short just the way it is, you probably wouldn't like that as much. They also add additional sound effects. Some of them get a little distracting. There's the use of slide whistles or something similar for How High Is Up, involving Curly slips on the grease. In the original short, it's silent. Here we get a row kind of sound effect to go with it, and it might be a little distracting again if you like the short the way it is. But overall, the re-edits and stuff don't bother me. There's even a scene where Paul Winchell walks into a pie fight taken from the Stooges' Half-Wits Holiday and gets hit with a pie, and it's edited pretty seamlessly. I'm not complaining too much about the editing or the presenting of the actual Stooges clips, because they're not actually that bad. And I could see maybe this being a bit of an incentive in the days of these themed Stooges DVD releases, because not all the shorts in this compilation film were made available on those small themed DVDs, that kind of thing. Some of them would be made available later after this box set and this DVD was released, like How High Is Up. Others, like Sockabye Baby, Oily to Bed, Oily to Rise, and What's the Matador would never be released on a themed DVD. So I could see this maybe being an incentive for people trying to build a Stooges DVD collection to at least have those clips readily available. Not to mention the DVD also includes A Bird in the Head from 1946. Not one of the better Stooges kind of horror shorts, but it does have some really fun parts and a great supporting performance by Vernon Dent, so I'd say it's a welcome bonus. But my biggest issue with Stop, Look, and Laugh isn't so much the creepy ventriloquist dolls and some of the weird offbeat kind of editing and humor and sequencing. It's the Marquee Chimps. Now the Marquee Chimps are not pictured on either of the home media releases. The Marquee Chimps, of course, were a troupe of trained chimpanzees. They do a little comedy bit at the beginning when Paul tells Jerry how the world began, and there are, of course, 3 chimps in a tree, one bald, one with a bowl haircut, and one with frizzy hair. They engage in a little bit of slapstick there, and that part feels pretty organic, but near about the, I'd say, 3/4 mark of the film, or even a little bit after, there's a scene where Paul tells Knucklehead Smith a bedtime story, and it's Cinderella redone with the Marquee Chimps. So all these chimps in these long gowns and kind of, fancy raiments that, courtiers would wear, something like that. All dubbed by either June Foray, if they're female, or Alan Reed, if they're male. So good voice talent, but these chimpanzees just look miserable, flouncing around in these ridiculous costumes, interacting with props, and I just felt kind of bad for them watching this, to be honest. I could see if you like kind of trained chimpanzee acts, maybe you would. And as far as I know, the Marquee Chimps were never treated badly. So I guess some people might like this, but it certainly didn't do anything for me. And it took me completely out of the movie. And I got to the point where I was hoping for Paul Winchell back, that kind of thing, because it was like, man, anything's better than this weird pseudo-musical Cinderella story with chimpanzees. When the Stooges feature films were released to Blu-ray on this new collection, Stop, Look, and Laugh was skipped. I can see why. Today it really isn't, anything worth having in your Stooges collection, I would say. I mean, again, if you like ventriloquist dummies or trained chimps, you might get a little more out of it than I did. But at the end of the day, it's an interesting time capsule, and it's got some interesting, I guess, moments to it that, like, okay, I can see why kids would go to the theater and see this if they watch the Stooges at home on TV, and I could see kids liking some of the ventriloquist dummy shenanigans, but at the end of the day, Stop, Look, and Laugh is far from essential, and I decided not to include it in my Three Stooges 1960s movie ranking because it really doesn't fit in with the others. But I thought it was weird enough and unusual enough that we'll use it as an intro and a jumping off point when we get into that ranking. So if you've seen Stop, Look, and Laugh, please share some of your thoughts on it below. The last thing for today, a fun typo. The back of the VHS box reads, starring Mo Howard, Larry Fine, and Curly Joe DeRita. I don't think that's quite the case. Curly Joe DeRita had nothing to do with this. I think they meant to say Curly Howard. Nuck, nuck, nuck. But I say this now because, weirdly enough, some of the other feature films, it reads starring Mo, Larry, and Curly Joe Howard. Really? So, we'll talk more about Curly Joe's contribution when we get to the first ranking video, but for now, here's a little teaser to whet your appetite. Stop, Look, and Laugh. I hope to see you for the ranking, and we'll have some more music videos coming up too. Until then, chowderheads, go out there and get poked in the eyes. And we'll see you next time.